really got the people. Everybody has to go to work. There it is. Number 12.
Okay. Okay, everybody, welcome. Today is April 8th. This is the Policy Committee meeting. I apologize for the late start. We had some technical difficulties. I am Tracy Osecki. I am the co-chair for Policy Committee. And I would ask that we go around starting to my left and introduce ourselves.
Ed Tate, School Board. Michael Roosevelt, School Board.
Matt Frederickson, IT Director.
Ann Horner, School Board.
Ron Spring, Director of HR.
Andy Sanko, Superintendent.
Andrea Mangold, Director of Communications.
Bob Hickey, School Board.
Yota Pali School Board.
Linda Stone, School Board.
Okay, we're going to talk about Policy 903 tonight, and before we start, I want to make a couple of comments. Public comment is an essential part of our meetings. It helps us all understand the diverse concerns and perspectives of parents, students, and others involved in Council Rock. I want to be clear that we are discussing this policy because the Pennsylvania School Board Association recently recommended that all Pennsylvania school boards make changes to policy about public comment. Traditionally, PSBA gives guidance that causes us to review our current policies. And therefore, this was added to our discussion for our policy committee. Tonight, we will discuss the draft policy that the administration brought to us with the goal of aligning on changes to bring to the next full board meeting as a first read. I know we all feel strongly about this topic, but I also think that we've had the chance to hear each other when we've discussed this policy at the last policy committee meeting and again at the last school board meeting. So I'm hopeful that we can reach alignment on a path forward tonight. I also want to address, it seems that there's been a miscommunication about the length of the public comment at the 30 minutes. The 30 minutes was added to the agenda by the previous school board, but it never made it to the policy, the previous policy. So it was on the agenda and it wasn't in the policy, and I think that created some confusion for everybody. So the Pennsylvania School Board Association recommended in their guidance that we choose either 30 minutes or an hour or some other period of time. And I think the attorneys thought, okay, well, it currently says in the agenda that it's 30 minutes, so we'll go with 30 minutes. But we're gonna discuss that more tonight. I have kept 3 principles in mind thinking about this policy, and I expect we can all agree on these. We want to protect our constitutional right to free speech. We want to ensure that Council Rock community members can make their voices heard through public comment at our meetings. And we want to ensure that our school board meetings are productive and accomplish the business of the district. We're going to have a discussion about the PSBA recommendations tonight. But at the end of this meeting, if we aren't aligned, we can always leave the public comment policy as it is. Our solicitor is not here. If we have comments or questions for him, then at the end of the meeting, we will call him and address those questions. Okay, I have kind of gone through and identified the different topics that we've discussed, and I think if everybody is amenable to it, I would recommend that we go around like topic by topic and try to come to some consensus about how to move forward. So the first topic, well, I will first read the list of topics that I have, and then if anybody else has something else that I don't have that you want to discuss, I'll add it to the list. The topics that I've come up with are the time limit, the proposed 30-minute time limit, the 3-minute time limit for each individual person, whether or not we are allowed to cede time, or we allow people to cede time, who is allowed to comment, how the public commenter's address is handled, who is able to terminate public comment, the solicitor or the presiding officer or both, when public comment is able to be terminated, what are the reasons, and then whether the statement is addressed to the presiding officers or to the entire board. Does anybody have anything I should add to this list? Okay. If you think of something, we can always, discuss it later. Okay. I think the first thing to discuss is the 30-minute limit We talked at the last board meeting about having that be unlimited and not having a limit to the a limit to either the agenda items or to the public comment at the end. Is everybody in agreement of having an unlimited public comment for both periods? Are there any problems with that? Okay, good.
I just want to clarify though that, as you said in the beginning, although it's not written in the current policy, it is in the current agenda, because that started, my understanding is that started during COVID, when people were coming and
Right.
public comment was taking hours, and Ed Salomon, who was the presiding officer at that point, he decided to initiate the 30 minutes in order to conduct the board business. And at that time, those of us who were not on the board, they were coming for public comment, we had to go through a lottery system, because there was only 30 minutes allowed. So you would give your name or you sign up, and I think the board secretary or somebody would decide who would speak. So that was not a perfect system, even like someone deciding who to speak, which is, so just a reminder that this current board did not initiate that. This was already a practice, although not written.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's something else that we should discuss. It is confusing for it to say 30 minutes on the agenda, but not be policy, but not be in the policy. That was confusing to me. So are we all amenable to taking that out of the agenda, to updating the agenda so it doesn't say 30? Okay. Okay. All right.
I'm sorry, Mr. Seki. You want the agenda to be modified so it no longer?
Yes, please.
Fine.
Just strike where it says 30 minutes from the agenda, and both the agenda items and the session at the end will be unlimited public comment.
Was made but we can make the change
Right.
to the published agenda immediately, and then
Okay.
after we approve.
It'll have to go through first read and
Yeah.
second read for the
So we should
policy.
just say public comment. Nothing else.
Yes.
Well, you can put the other part where public comment is a chance for blah, 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 blah.
That's a common statement. It's
That
part
would
of
have
here,
to say.
Right.
but there won't be anything, no mention of time.
Right.
Okay.
Fine. Okay, let's talk about the 3 minutes. That's the next thing that I have. Anybody have feedback?
Well, I'd like to see it stay the same as it's always been.
It's more than enough time for a comment to be made.
I think so. Anybody have a problem with the 3 minutes? Okay, good.
This is easy.
I'm sure it won't be easy forever. The next thing I have is seating time. Does anybody have feelings about whether or not, that's not in our current policy. It's not mentioned. The Rudolph Clark recommendation was no, and that's the PSBA. Oh, it's not mentioned in the PSBA guidance. The Rudolph Clark recommended no. Eastburn and Gray recommended no. Does anybody, Bob?
I had said before, and I'll stand with it, but I probably won't die on this sword, that I would be okay if someone ceded 3 minutes of their time to someone else. Just because some people, it's not necessarily that I want the one person to be able to speak for 6 minutes, but some people are very uncomfortable speaking in public. So if someone wanted to be their voice, as it were, to me, I don't think that's such a bad thing, but you're not stifling anybody's voice if the person chooses not to speak or is just too shy or not very good at, public speaking,
Anybody
so.
with the ability to.
But I had said it before, so like I said, I would have no problem if we allowed a person to cede his speech to someone else.
I agree. I'm okay with somebody ceding time. I suppose it opens up a whole thing about how many times can you cede and under certain circumstances, but I don't have a problem with ceding time.
So current policy is not.
Current policy doesn't
that
mention it. Linda?
I just think it would add to confusion. I'd like to see every individual able to speak on their own behalf. And then I think it becomes confusing if you're saying, well, so-and-so is going to speak for me, and then that person. And, are they from the district and not from the district? I think it adds confusion, and the individuals who just can't, are uncomfortable, always can reach out via email, and make their comments known. So I think to limit the confusion, I would like to make sure that they don't cede time to someone else.
I mean, I don't mind leaving it as it is, in our current policy,
Well, it's not
It doesn't-
mentioned in our
it doesn't
current
address
policy.
it.
okay? It doesn't matter. I mean, ideally, to keep the order and make sure everybody has a chance to speak. And I think our current policy says that someone cannot speak on the same topic twice. So it's all so it's more orderly if we do not see. So, everybody chooses to speak on the topic that they came to speak. They have the 3 minutes. And if someone is uncomfortable, I totally understand that. But they can maybe ask their friend to come speak for them who are more comfortable in public speaking, or they can, write to the board. There are other ways. And if we choose not to say anything about it in the policy like we have now, I'm also fine with that. Actually, I do like our current policy.
Like our current bylaw.
Well, then why are we changing it? Why are we changing
We
it?
were
We
recommending,
don't have to change it.
Why are we changing
no, I
it?
can answer the question.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
PSBA recommended that we update our policy. So we got that recommendation from PSBA. First, Eastburn and Gray recommended, correct, Dr. Sanko, in the
Correct.
fall? And then we learned, Mr. Frederickson, that
PSBA puts out quarterly updates, and the quarterly updates make recommendation of changes to policies.
right,
We usually review those. If they're substantial, then we usually consult with the attorneys. Eastburn and Gray told us that there was a substantial change coming from PSBA and recommended that when it was published, that we consider adopting those changes.
Yes.
Which is why we went through the process. When Rudolph Clark came on board in January, we sent the policy to Peter and said, when this comes out, would you review it? He reviewed it, he made these recommendations. That's why we're reviewing the policy.
and that's why we didn't do it back in September or November, because we were waiting for the PSBA recommendations, which came in January.
It came in late January.
Yeah, so, and of course, the PSBA recommendations, we don't have to accept in the whole or at all. It's just recommendations, so that's why we're reviewing the policy.
And it's also good practice anyway to periodically review policies. So there's no harm in what we're doing, even if we do leave it the same. So you got to get a consensus on
Yeah.
seating time.
I mean, Ed, do you have anything to add before I share my feelings?
On seating time, I'm ambivalent.
Yeah, my concern is, I have no problem if okay, there's a husband and wife and one of them wants to speak for both of them. I think that was your example, Bob. That's fine with me. I worry that it's going to get out of control. I don't want one person speaking for 20 people and going on for, an hour.
And if you don't have anything in writing, you won't be able to make a decision on that.
I think if I remember correctly, tell me guys if you remember the same, Ed would kind of make it up with that. So Ed would decide which way to go. Sometimes he would sit, sometimes he would not let people sit time. So do you have that recollection?
I remember Ed allowing people to.
Yeah, he generally allowed people to go on, like he, you know, as a far, you know, even with the 3 minutes, he kind of used his judgment as to how far he would let things, which I believe is up to the discretion of, at this point in time, it is you. You could, you know, if you wanted to let something go, you know, as opposed to a hard 3 minutes, you know, you use your discretion as to what they're doing. I agree, and like I said, this isn't a hill I'm gonna, you know, to die on, because like Ann said before, you know, 3 minutes should be enough time to make your point. So when I say cede your time, I don't mean so the person who's talking can talk for another 3 to 6 minutes because he hasn't finished his point yet. You know, he should be able to make his point in 3 minutes, and if it's not in 3 minutes, he needs to be able to condense it in some way, shape, or form, or come back at the end of the evening and finish his point, you know, but,
Alternatively, Pennsbury has 5 minutes. I mean, you could just change the 3 minutes to 5 minutes. The other thing, as far as, you know, seating time and not being in the current policy, that neither excludes it nor does it include it. It's sort of left
Open.
to the presiding officer and to the discretion. That's not necessarily in favor of changing the time limit from 3 to 5. I'm not opposed to it either, I'm just offering it up as another way to think about things.
it's another possibility.
I mean, I said I like our current policy, I like the 3 minutes. It has worked well for us so far, and most people are able to make their comments in 3 minutes.
Right.
And sometimes when the presiding officer thought that maybe an extra 30 seconds would be okay,
Yeah.
it was allowed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're not like dictators, right?
I think the only problem with having anything discretionary is that someone then can say, well, you let so-and-so do it for this, and now you're not letting me, is it because you don't like what I'm saying? And that's why I think it shouldn't be discretionary, it should really be written so that, you know, that at least we're giving an appearance of fairness, which we should be. to
I'm
everyone.
sure if the solicitor was here, she would agree with you.
As a suggestion, can we, especially now since we have to sit at the table as opposed to the podium, is there something that we can put at that table so that the speaker knows he's running out of time? For example, because if someone's speaking, you know, and I'm making a point, I really don't necessarily want to be interrupted by somebody saying, you got 30 seconds, you know? So if we have some kind of timer there, and I think we used to,
No.
No.
you know, but if I was somewhere, maybe it was at another
I'm sorry.
board.
No, we didn't have we've never had a timer, other than Jerry Grupp, but, sorry, Jerry, for listening. We can probably get some.
Yeah, I'm just saying, maybe it was another board meeting of another school district that I was at
No, our districts
somewhere.
do have timers.
Because I've been, you know, and there was an actual thing there, so you knew, and it kind of actually went from green to red when you were going into that zone, which I think it was like, say, 30 seconds before you were done. So when you saw that go to red, you know what, you got 30 seconds to wrap up what you're going to say, you know, because then it does, you know.
We used to have a stopwatch on the podium that projected for the for the speakers. We did have that, which was a countdown timer.
Okay.
Yes, we had that.
Yeah, something so that the speaker knows he's running out of time, but he's not getting interrupted by someone on the board interjecting, telling him he only has a little bit of time left, you know, and then, you know, it's time and, you know, wrap it up.
Let me do some research. We'll figure something out.
Thanks.
That's a great idea. Okay, let's come back to the seating time. The next one is who can speak. And I'll go through this. Our current policy says, and this might not be completely verbatim because I retyped it, so there could be typos or, you know, you have to forgive me. Our current policy says that a resident, a taxpayer of the district, a representative of a group or community in the district, any representative of a firm eligible to bid, any district employee or district student. PSBA recommended district residents and taxpayers, employees, and students. That was the same with Rudolph Clark. Eastburn and Gray didn't give a recommendation. At one of our previous meetings, somebody said, I think it was Joe, said, well, what if I have a parent and I have a kid who goes to Council Rock? And I think I think we all agree, well, yeah, that person should absolutely be allowed to speak. So we would add, parents of students in the district. Anybody else?
Are we trying to be inclusive or are we trying to be overly precise? What's the intent?
The intent, I think, is to make sure that they have a vested interest in the community. But we don't want to exclude, now, the way it's written, it sounds like, oh, if you're a parent of a current student, you can't come. So you want to make sure that at least you're covering all the
'Cause if
aspects, right?
If the intent is to be inclusive, why don't we just say the opportunity to comment is open to all, but priority could be given to an list. That's currently actually how Pennsbury currently reads it. It says the opportunity to comment during the public comment session will be open to all. Priority will be given to the following stakeholders, and then it goes into the list effectively that
And then-
Pennsbury has.
Don't you think that's going to invite people who don't have a vested interest in the community?
I don't think people that don't have a vested interest are going to show up for public comment.
Well, I think they will, especially if they have political interests. I don't want anybody from some extreme group coming in to just talk, as opposed to letting the community member talk. Because you don't necessarily know, now you'll have to sit and figure out who is this person who's here.
And that's why I like this, priority will be given to,
But then it means you have to figure that out.
which is easy because we've got the township that you're from.
I have a problem with that because if we're gonna have unlimited time for public comment, it's one thing to stay all night for people who are residents and taxpayers and have kids in the district, but I'm not gonna stay all night for people from outside of the district, and I think that
Yeah.
opens us up for a lot of liability.
And we just have to watch though, if we have any group, anybody, Bucks County group that comes, we can't exclude them. We
So-
don't want to be exclusive, right? We have to.
So,
watch
like,
all.
if we said, we can leave it as it says now, like a representative of a community or district, is that?
A community group.
community
that
group or
has-
group based in the
because it could
community
be
or something
someone
like
from
that.
Bucks County that's coming, speaking on behalf of something that,
Bucks County,
Right.
what?
could be anything, ADL, anything.
Bob?
Could be anything.
To Mike's point, I haven't seen anybody, some of you've all been around longer than I have. I haven't seen anybody yet hijack a meeting as far as that's concerned. And this is something, it's a policy that if someone does come in and does that and we find out that we're turning into a three-ring circus, we can always come back at the next policy committee meeting and change this. Just because we're doing this now doesn't mean it's written in stone forever. It's only written in stone for as long as we keep it in stone. So like I said, agreeing with Mike, if it turns out that we have other groups coming in, because, for example, since you referenced his name, if Mr. Grupp were to come to one of our school board meetings, then I would have the distinction of saying, excuse me, Mr. Grupp, can't say anything. You don't live in the district any longer, you have nobody associated with the district, you're not a taxpayer as far as I know of, you're out.
And do we want to do that to previous board members?
Well, I think then you're adding a discretionary piece to it. And I think adding discretion takes away from people who are in the community that have vested interest in the community, especially that we said it's unlimited. We can be here forever, and we're fine with that as long as you belong here and you are part of this group. So maybe you can put in something like, if you're not within this group, you need approval before you come. Maybe that they can come and ask if they can make comment.
But I think that's also gonna be like,
Well,
discretionary, and we can't have that from a legal point of view,
We've got to watch because of if you just go out there and on the PA Sunshine Law for public comment, states residents and taxpayers, that's it. So do we want to open up? the
we have been
district further?
advised by both attorneys
Just Rudolph Clark and PSBA said limited.
They're limiting who we have here. So I go by what the legal advice is. And the reason usually is because then we're open to discretionary and comments from noisy, noisemakers.
I mean, we did see.
False actors, we've seen that in other school districts. I don't want to hear. I don't think anyone wants it here. So that's why I think, we
You
want
can't open the
to,
district up.
people inside the district.
As a counterpoint to your legal advice,
Yeah.
the reason we're here, or possibly one of the reasons we're here, is because of the legal advice that we're now getting, that was given to the Pennsbury district that caused this mess in the first place.
I don't think that's true, so let's not, why should we bring that up?
I think it is kind of true. I recall reading the PSBA guidance thing that came out to our email, and I thought that it specifically referenced that case. I could be wrong.
Yeah, it's just that, maybe I'm wrong.
Yoda?
It does.
So specifically to that case, the judge who ruled said that the people who will make public comment should be people from the district and the community. They did not open the door for anybody else to come in and make public comment. And I've seen that in several places. We can find the exact ruling, but I also spoke with Peter and he confirmed that this was the ruling, that, and every time a case like that went to a judge, the judge was in favor of keeping it to the community. I mean, this is the Council Rock School Board meeting, and we want to hear from people in Council Rock. We don't want to invite people outside the community who may have, I don't know what kind of interest to be here. We want to listen to people in our community. And the way the policy was before made that very clear. So why, I mean, I would not change that. I would not go and open the door to like people that come and just, they're not connected to Council Rock. No, this is Council Rock and we want to hear people from Council Rock. Whatever they have to say, we're going to hear it. But we're not going to invite like actors from other, who knows what.
So do you want to take a consensus on that?
That's, I mean, we're not all here,
We're not all
but,
here.
you know, what do we think about leaving the verbiage of the current policy? Can we agree to consensus on that?
Which section are we talking about?
It's on page 3 of the document I handed out. It's the second paragraph down. The board requires public participants to be residents or taxpayers.
So actually, what we're discussing is trying to be a little bit more inclusive.
Than this.
For example, the parent of a student in the district, that
Right,
One
that should be in
example.
here.
So our current policy does limit public comment participants to residents or taxpayers. I personally think that's a smart thing to do. And, we even added at least one category of people who could be permitted to participate in public comment. I think it's pretty broad.
You can just add to the end of it, or any district student, and take out the "or" after employee, any district student or their parent. / legal guardian.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
fine. Is that agreeable? Okay. Yep.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
Okay. The address is the next thing I have. And just to give a little bit of background on this, across the state, some boards had, and I think not even just school boards, but some boards had you state your address when you came up for public comment. It actually says in our policy that we would do that, but we never have done it. We've just had them state their municipality. I don't think that anybody, correct me if I'm wrong, but nobody thinks that they should be stating their address publicly, right?
No.
Okay, so we're all in agreement on that. We discussed, and I think this was the recommendation, having a sign-in sheet, the sign-in to comment, that you would sign in with your address there. I think there was a really valid point that, like, you know, that could be, you know, anybody could see it, anybody subsequently signing in, you know, could see it, and then that's not fair. I think that's valid. Conversely, PSBA provided us with, it's at the back page of your packet here. Mm-hmm. This is what they are recommending, and so if we did something like this, when you came to comment, you would fill this out, you would provide your address, and you would hand it to the board secretary. And then either the board secretary could use this to call, or there could be like a separate sign-in sheet. But this would never be, not only would it never be public, but none of the 9 of us would see it. So obviously the concern here is making sure that they're district residents, but also safety. You know, if there was something that was threatening, to make sure that, you know, the police or whoever, but it would never could get it, Don Mahalik, you know, have access to that.
Are you
but not us.
suggesting that there wouldn't be a sign-in sheet, and instead every participant would complete this form? Or
I'm suggesting that every participant, sorry,
No, that's all right.
would complete this form, and then either there could not be a sign-in sheet, we could just hand this to the secretary, and the secretary could call the people, or there could be an additional sign-in where they just write their name.
I mean, the sign-up sheet gives an order who signed up first, and usually it makes sense to speak in that order, so it makes sense to maybe have both.
We could stack these on the table, and when they come up for public comment, they could take one, fill it out, and make sure that we have someone in the room collect them. And we just give those to the board secretary.
And keep
Seems
them on
like
the
a
right
lot of
order.
paperwork.
Yeah,
Yeah, they can number them as they're handed in.
sign-in sheet's fine.
It seems like a
The
lot of
sign-in
paperwork.
sheet's fine. We don't need extra. Their name, their township, it works.
Yeah, and do this in private.
Well, I think Ann's saying don't do that.
I think this just seems like a lot of paperwork,
Yeah.
and I think it's gonna take a lot of time, and maybe somebody fills it out in advance. Maybe even 20 people fill it out in advance and come in and hand it quickly, and you have other people that have been in line, and now they're not getting to go because it takes them longer to fill out this form. I'm in agreement, we just keep this as a sign-in sheet listing your municipality.
No, we do both.
We
The
do
sign-up sheet will give the order of speaking, and this one will be primarily for safety and security reasons. And I understand that this is maybe a new thing, but I just want to say, this board has more women than ever, and women tend to be more, they tend to like more security, and they pay more attention to like make sure that there's safety and security in the surroundings. So it would make sense if something happens for like Dawn to have this information. Of course, someone could lie and give the wrong address, but better safe than sorry. So I would like it's gonna be private, only the administration will see it and will be used if needed. So Don Mahalik, I mean, I don't need to see it, but he will have it if needed.
I'm just gonna read from the current policy. It says this is our current policy. All individuals wishing to participate in a public board meeting shall register their intent with the board secretary in advance of the meeting and shall include the name and address of the participant, topic to be addressed, and group affiliation if applicable. So it is in the current policy.
Right.
Okay.
I feel strongly about having the address. I think it's a great deterrent for anyone that wants to come in and make believe they're someone else. Because they now have to be a little more definitive about who they are and so on, as opposed to just putting a name and a township, an illegible name in a township that's not recognizable, which has happened.
I like the PSBA form. I'm glad you surfaced that, Tracy. And you know, just a simple sign up, as Yoda pointed out, just name, that's it, on the sign up sheet, just so we have an order of people that sign up. And not making them sign up in advance of the meeting like the current policy, which again has never been enforced, I don't think. In fact, I know, because we have been in the practice of allowing people just to walk up. And we can still do that, they just gotta fill out the form, and that form would take 30 seconds, you know.
I'm not clear that the wording shall register their intent with the board secretary in advance of the meeting specifically prescribes that you fill out a form. When they fill out their name in the front, that goes to the secretary. By signing in and indicating the municipality, they are meeting this policy. They're registering their intent with the board secretary in advance of the meeting.
Yeah, that's the current policy.
Yeah,
We're proposing to change it.
And my point is that it sounded like there was comments suggesting that this form meets the current policy and that we have not been meeting that because we haven't been filling out a form.
No, we haven't been
You're not
asking
saying
for an
that.
address,
Okay.
even though it says we asked for an address.
Because I believe just filling out the sign-up sheet and indicating municipality meets this current policy, and they're registering an intent with the board secretary. And if you just strike address and have name and municipality, that's.
But why
that
is
should be
against
sufficient.
the privately someone giving their address for purely safety and security reasons? It's not gonna be public. I mean, I agree, I should not know the address of the person next to me that, but this is totally private. We live in a world that, it's the security and safety. I know we have measures in our schools, we have measures every day, just one extra step that will make us maybe feel a bit more comfortable and more safe. It's not a violation of privacy in any way.
And it's not just our safety, it's all the people that are coming to the meetings too.
There seems to be a lot of, I guess, concern for something that, I don't know, maybe I'm not aware of foreign people coming in, hijacking the meeting, having safety concerns, and that filling out a form is gonna stop them. They're gonna say, oh shucks, they got me, I better get back in my car and drive back to whatever state I came from.
No, but if
This
they're,
has never happened.
if they're
I'm not-
aware.
I suggested, I don't think that inviting it, but are you privy to information that perhaps I'm not, that this
No,
may happen?
It happened in Central Bucks. Ed?
I mean, it's gonna happen here.
It doesn't, but we, better safe than sorry. Ed?
Well, in the not too distant past, we had an incident where we had somebody at public comment that left several of us pretty unsettled by his behavior, and our security staff was unable to identify this person. We still don't know who they are, where they lived, and I personally found that very unsettling. And that's the first time in my 9 years on the board that I felt threatened by somebody in public comment. And it would make me feel better if I knew that we had the name and address of everyone who spoke at public comment.
Well, this form also says phone number as well.
Oh, we can strike that. We don't have to.
I would take that off too.
That's a good point. I don't think we need the phone number.
Okay, any other
1, 2,
comments?
3, 4, 5.
And maybe,
Who is this form gonna go to?
It would go to the secretary.
The secretary.
But where does it go? I'm very hesitant because we have an address. We are protecting also the children. We have parents that come here that have to protect the children. Addresses do not get out. That is my major concern.
Dr.
You have
Sanko,
the
how can
address.
we handle this?
I'm sorry?
Ms. Horn?
He has the address of all the.
He has address.
I mean, no, but I think Ms. Horner's point is valid. She's concerned that what is the secretary, if the secretary collects this page from every individual who speaks, what will the secretary do with it to make sure it stays private?
Logistically, we would have to determine where it goes, but I think we would put under lock and key.
And that's something you feel
That would be,
comfortable.
the secretary would be the sole person to have access to that.
I'm concerned of how does it get from in the meeting to the secretary? There's chances that somebody could pick that up.
She's in the
She would
meeting.
be there,
She's in
she
the
would
meeting.
collect them.
She's handed
She would
it.
collect them.
Person's handing it.
Could I just ask a question from the logistics standpoint?
Yeah.
At what point do they fill this out?
When they
So I come into the meeting, sign in on a sign-up sheet. Do I then get this form and I have to fill this out before I'm allowed to speak?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think we can talk about it, but I think that's what PSBA is recommending.
So I fill the sheet out then?
Yeah.
You want me to walk up to the DS and give it to the board secretary?
I'm just thinking, trying to think this through.
I just have
Some
a
people are watched,
to be out.
Ms. Mangold is talking.
some people watch the meeting and then come in. So
Right.
they're coming in mid-meeting to speak. Or someone who just has an idea in the moment. They hear something and they say, you know what, I stand up at public speaking. They run out and sign their name up, but they might not have a chance to fill out this form and get it to the board secretary. There has to be a mechanism, like you said, Ms. Horner, to collect them and get them up there.
Could I make a suggestion? The person who fills the forms out gives them to Mr. Mahal. Because you have the sign-up sheet, you have what you need to call the people up for public comment. If the reason we're filling these out is from a security standpoint anyway, does it make more sense to just give them to Don?
It's fine with me.
I have a hard time with the form with an address. I have a very hard time with the address.
Can I ask when we fill out just the regular sign-in sheet, what happens to those sign-in sheets?
So they go from the sign-in sheet, the kind of little kiosk or table. Matt takes them typically at the front end of every meeting, gives them to the board president. Once public comment is done, they go to the board secretary and they're archived.
So they're archived?
Yes.
Is there a point where they're destroyed?
I don't know. The laws for keeping minutes for boards, so basically it's not part of the record until it's put into the record. The official minutes that you guys approve, those are the only official minutes from the meeting. Those we're required to keep for, it's 100 years?
I think 7.
It's like 100 years. We have anyway, binders and binders of board meetings. Her documents, I believe, I think she keeps them for 7 or 8 years, and then she gets rid of them. I don't know. She has a filing cabinet that's locked, and she's the only one that's key to it, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think the district's in the practice of keeping a lot of confidential information very secure, so. But I'll go back to where this started, which was people didn't feel comfortable with the idea of a sign-in sheet where we were asking people to list their addresses. So this is a more secure step, I think.
I agree.
I think it's a reasonable compromise.
All right, go ahead.
Before we go, we're right, I mean, we really don't have any consensus on this and we're missing 2 people. So what do we do? I mean, although I mentioned the phone number part, I'm not in love with the address part of it either.
I'm not in love with the whole form.
Right, that's what I mean, so I'm not sure where we go with this part of the discussion, although the place to have the discussion is here and not at our board meeting on a Thursday night, which is why I bring it up, because I don't want to have to talk about this
Well,
a week and a half from now, where we're talking and taking 2 hours of the public's time talking about something that we should be doing here.
and what if you have a consensus here and then you call and get Nikki and Joe's consensus on it and then write it up with
But
that?
that's not exactly the way a committee system is supposed to work. We can try to reach a consensus tonight, and if we can't, we can go forward with the proposal and it gets voted on. I think we're back to first read on this no matter what.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, then even if we leave the policy, we don't make a change in the policy that section of the policy, it's looking for the address. Northampton municipality to me is not an address.
Yeah, the current policy asks for the address, I mean,
Yeah, so then I would say, okay, leave it the way it is. But I agree not to have people's address right there at the sign-in. Because then anybody could see somebody else's address.
20 years ago, we used to collect
Well,
sign-in
so-
sheets.
yeah.
I'm not sure when it was drawn.
just like this, a sign-in sheet like this, or was it?
No, it was part of the sign-in sheet. You put your name, your address, and the topic you wanted to discuss.
But I feel pretty strongly about this, just as having Don Mahalik at our meetings is a deterrent. I think this is also a deterrent to some of the crazy things that have gone on elsewhere. So, are we at an impasse on this
Yeah,
part
I'm a
of the
little, I'm
policy?
just a little confused. Like, for example, I'm looking at tonight's meeting and there's all these people sitting behind me and I have no
Yeah.
idea who they are, where they live or whatever. You know, what does that mean? Like, it's the same thing, like, am I supposed to feel threatened by any of these people? Like,
That's a good point.
you know, we've kind of added,
We welcome everybody to come.
like, everybody who walks in that door, you know, nobody showed, I mean, those doors are locked and when I got here and running, you know,
And we've added a security guard recently at committee meetings. I mean, I think.
right, and we've added security, and we've
I think-
added security at our board meetings. We have now people sitting at a table as opposed to at a podium, you know, for something that I don't want to say is unnecessary, but I think we've added security measures in there that handle the situation as opposed to having somebody, you know, write their address down. And I'd like, if you do go with it, I loved your suggestion, though, as opposed, someone else needs to handle this as opposed to letting someone walk up to the dais and, here you go. I mean, to me, that's more threatening, somebody actually walking up to anybody sitting there that's, you know, within an arm's length, but.
And we have to protect these families, people that have addresses that are not to be exposed. That's my concern too, because they have a right to come speak, and we cannot not let them come speak. We have addresses
I
that
guess
are not to be exposed anywhere, and we have a duty to protect that.
I think we just
We
talked
just
about.
talked about how to
system to do
secure
that.
it. You give it to Don Mahalik.
do you
He's
have a problem
secure.
with Don
And then the board
Mahalik?
I have no
secretary.
problem with Don Mahalik.
So I don't
Addresses
understand.
should not be out there.
We're not putting.
Well, we're not putting them
We're
out
not
there.
out there.
That's
Talking about giving them to Don Mahalik.
one of.
Well,
I'm trying to- I mean-
Matt could look up anybody's address.
I mean, like I said, if you have a consensus on it, you know, then
Understand that.
fine, I'm just saying, what I don't wanna do is, at our next board meeting, be talking about this form,
Oh,
I agree.
you're right, I
Thank you.
agree.
so. If you have a consensus and we have to vote on it, then,
All right,
you know, so be it.
we're gonna then, I think, move forward with this for the first read, for.
What does that mean, move forward with this? You're gonna include the form?
Yes,
Some of
including
us
the
have
form,
problems.
like with a phone number crossed out.
Yeah, and when we
I
get
mean,
to a
that's
vote
fine.
in the
We'll
board
get to the
meeting,
vote.
if there's 5 people opposed to the form, then the form goes away.
Didn't the two of you just agree that you don't wanna be talking about the form at the next board meeting?
No, it'll be in part of the first read.
It'll be attached to the first read. We don't have to discuss it necessarily. We can talk about it.
If it's attached to the first read, it's open to discussion.
Of course it is.
Right.
Well, we're not going to not put it in as a proposal because we don't want to discuss it. I think Bob's point was, I think we've resolved it. Maybe I'm misinterpreting Bob's point, but, at a certain point, you gotta move on. I think
agree.
everybody said
There's a lot to discuss here.
Yeah,
We've
Good.
already moved on one piece. I don't know, unless moving on means you're including it.
Yeah.
And we're
Well,
not listening to any other.
You're talking about the seating
objection from
time.
board members.
I was gonna come back to the seating time, but.
Yeah, same thing, fine.
But it's gonna go to a first read again next week, is that what you're saying? Just a
Has-
first read?
it has to anyway.
Yeah, I
Does,
first read and then
does it go to
second
the first read next week?
So-
I mean, we could
so
table it,
Whether
yes,
we put it on
again,
the
but-
agenda for next week or not is up to the two of you. If it's not ready to go to the agenda, then we can wait until May's board meeting. I mean, it goes to a first read when you feel it's ready to go.
I mean, we can just keep the current policy, but I think, you know, the current policy leaves a lot of discretion to the presiding officer. Yoda could, the way I read it, Yoda could say, fill this form
Write your
out,
address
start,
down.
yeah, starting next week.
Well, the other
That's right.
problem with leaving discretion to the presiding officer is that it means there's legal exposure for discriminating. Someone can say that, you know, the presiding officer let him speak for 4.5 minutes, and now you're cutting me off at 3 minutes. That's why, you know, it's smart to enforce rules, that's all.
And that's
Yeah.
why we're looking at it.
Yeah.
Good.
And we're talking about it.
So, okay, so just to clarify, specifically for this form, we say that we would like someone to write their address, not their phone number, and the information that is here, and hand it to our safety and security, is he director or like?
I think, I don't know that we can commit Don to every single meeting. I think it would be a member of the safety and security team,
So someone from that team, right?
and then give it to the board secretary.
Right, so none of us will see that, nobody else in the audience will see it. It's just the person who speaks gives this to our security people. And just in case, like the incident that Ed just described, that they were all looking at each other, like what is happening here? And then I know that our security head went even to the police about that, and nobody could identify that person. So I mean, is this gonna solve the problem? I don't know, but at least we're doing a step in the right direction.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have a logistics background, so I'm just from a logistics background. I show up in the meeting, I sign up to speak, I take the form, and I don't bother to fill it out. My name gets called, and I go up and public speak, and then I leave, but I never fill the form out. Is there a check and balance that you'd like to put in place?
Yeah, you're right. We should think about that.
That's why, I mean, I think having
That's
this
why I think
form
it's very
opens up a
hard.
whole host of
This-
logistical problems.
Yeah.
When they sit down to speak, that's when they fill it out.
No,
No, that would take too long.
Yeah.
Well, that's when they hand it in. When they're sitting down to speak, they hold the form, and that's when they hand it in.
Hand it in before you.
Do you have your form? And we hand it in.
But then how do you get security if there hasn't been time for the safety and security people to look at this form? Are they just
They're not
collecting
looking,
it to check?
yes,
the
they're not
box?
looking at it. They are just
Then
collecting
what's the
it.
difference if you handing it in or not?
It's, it's been it's a deterrent, as well as we can always then double check later if there's an issue. Then we know who it
I
was.
think that
And that's a strong deterrent.
And I think that the last time when we did have this issue, that, Mr. Cinco, Dr. Cinco, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that they tried to double check and they weren't able to double check. And so the allowance to double check is really what this is providing us. I mean, it's a crazy world.
Yes.
Who are we talking about? Several of you have mentioned somebody that you didn't, what are?
We're talking
I'm not
about-
remember, I don't,
Mr. Iverson. I don't know what else to call him.
what,
The guy who was wearing.
He came in with an Allen Iverson
The Allen Iverson.
basketball shirt.
oh, and the guy that was wearing the
mask.
sick, the hospital mask, and saying he was sick?
And he had the
And the
bucket,
hat,
which we didn't know
and
what was in the
gloves,
bucket.
and gloves, and
That's concerning. So Dr. Cinco, can you,
Didn't we just
I
go
don't know.
through that though, with COVID? Is that what we were asking
Well, I
people
don't
to
think
do,
we're
was to wear
upset about,
masks
I
and
don't think
gloves?
we're upset
And
about the
gloves
masks. I think
and
we're more
hoodie
upset about
and-
like what could
and
have
his
been in the
behavior.
bucket. Dr. Cinco, can you, to the extent that this is a public meeting, but to the extent that you can you explain what happened after that meeting and how a system like this might have helped?
So, after that meeting, people expressed discomfort. The name that was on the sign-in sheet, we went through all of our databases to find it, we could not. Our security reported it to the Newtown Borough Police Department. Based on the name that we had on the sign-in sheet, we could not identify who it was, even after viewing our security footage. We were able to see the individual leave campus, and that's where we are with it. But we did not have anyone in our system that matched the name that was on the sign-in sheet. And I will say that, not everybody in the folks in our system have children in our system. So
Which he claimed to have.
that
claim here, yeah.
could or may not include people that would come to speak.
So he provided false information on a form. So how is another
How's
form going to
another
prevent
form
him
gonna
from
be
providing
that
false
it's not gonna be
information?
falsified? We have no control over it.
It's another form of deterrence.
And I think the idea is that we could check it later and say okay, that wasn't, you gave the wrong information or whatever. And then if they came to speak again, then Dawn or whoever would say hey, look, you gave the wrong information last time, you don't get to speak.
Also, I think it allows somebody to meter their,
Linda, are you gonna
Yeah.
put your address
Conversation.
out on the form for everybody to see?
It's not for everybody to see.
Well, that's the thing. This is where we're stuck. We should not be doing this at all.
But
I
What are
don't
you
know,
talking
everyone knows
about?
my address.
this is,
I don't know what you're talking about.
we're talking about not letting it be out there. I think that was a valid
We are-
point.
And that was, we
are
already
risking
restricted that.
To put somebody's address out there.
But
You're risking it.
We are not putting it out
We're not
there.
here to put out addresses.
We're not saying that, Anne.
But we have, in our system, we have the address of every child who has ever gone through this school,
Yeah,
right? I
we
mean, they
have
all have to
that.
register,
Right.
it's not
And
like
that's
we,
confidential.
and so would this be.
And so is this. The other thing is somebody comes in, right? And not like that individual, because he came here with the intent to be disruptive and angry. That was his intent, to
How do you
hide
know
his.
this is intent?
Because a reasonable person recognized that that individual was not here to make a valid complaint or to get information. He was there to be disruptive and intimidate. A reasonable person knows that was he was there to to intimidate. But something like this, if we have somebody that's from the district that really comes and then they may be, their tendency is to be more controlled about their behavior. If they know they've filled out their address
How did,
and so on.
How do
If they know that it's, that's all.
how did you determine that a reasonable person knows that they're going to disrupt? Is that based upon what he said or how he was dressed or what characteristic?
So, and Dr. Sanko, correct me if I'm incorrect, but that person was acting irregular and the security guard called the Newtown Borough Police. I don't think any of us were involved in that. The security guard made the decision to call the police.
So
Is that correct?
They made that
That's correct.
decision too.
So that's a reasonable person, the security
I would
the
agree.
security officer.
That's how most decisions are made in certain conflicts, is what would a reasonable person do, or how would a reasonable person think or react?
I understand the comment. I'm asking, how do you identify as a reasonable person that this person intended to disrupt? Was
my
it based
gosh.
upon how they were dressed?
He
or
came
what they
here with
said
a
or what?
can of something in a garbage can. He wasn't coming here to be sick. Ed?
Yeah,
I don't want to argue on that.
It troubles me when we spend so much board time on issues that I don't think deserve this kind of extended debate. I think we should be able to find a compromise and move on. We found a compromise on the time limit issue. We agreed to do away with the time limit. That was, to me, the most important issue. We resolved that. Let's not get tied up in knots over what's, I think, a relatively minor issue. I don't think PSBA would have come up with this form if PSBA thought this was a bad idea. I think it's a reasonable ask, and I'm just surprised we're spending so much time on it.
I have another comment, and that is that if the policy presently asks for an address, most policies are not about logistics and administration. It's about policy. If the policy is asking for an address, then technically Yoda can make a decision on how we administer what's in the policy. And if she wants to put in this form in whatever way, she can, just like how you have a sign-in sheet. It's not written here how the logistics is never part of policy. It's part of how you administer what's written in the policy. And we already asked for address, and I think we should leave it that way.
Okay, all right, for now, let's move on to the next topic. We have, as Ed said, spent quite a bit of time on this. All right, the next topic I have is who can terminate. Our current policy says that the presiding officer can terminate. The PSBA recommendation was that the presiding officer or the district solicitor can terminate comment. So Rudolph Clark put that exact verbiage into the policy, the draft policy. I think there was a concern about that. I am going to propose that if it's for time, the solicitor or the presiding officer can terminate. If it's for another reason, it should have to be the presiding officer.
Yeah, only the presiding officer.
Okay, with that.
You're fine with
What
that?
your proposal
Well, they're not okay with it.
is? What?
No, they're okay with
No,
presiding officer.
Only
They
presiding
don't think that the
Yeah.
solicitor should be able to terminate for time
Yeah.
either.
Nope.
To a large degree, Bob's comment about a countdown clock probably solves a lot of timing issues.
Yeah.
Yeah,
think
that's
that's a
probably,
great
Less
idea.
intrusive,
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
that's a good idea.
So,
But if someone is over, and even if they say it and they keep going, someone has to say
the
something.
presiding
And
officer.
it will be you,
That will be a,
Oh, that's fine.
yeah.
All right, so we'll do presiding officer.
But I
Fine.
don't know if we're gonna have the device ready for the next board meeting, are we?
No
I mean,
pressure.
and we don't, and listen, we don't have to, because we are still under the old policy anyway. We operate under.
Yeah,
because
yes.
this is- yeah, So we're
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Could I just throw something out there? I know you guys just decided presiding officer. In the past, Mr. Cox would speak up during public comment. If someone was saying something that he felt was in violation of state law or they crossed the line, I'm not saying that you want to allow that. I'm just saying if you put in the policy that the solicitor can't speak up, does it back you into the corner? That's all I'm suggesting, because Mr. Cox in the past, I mean, Andy, you remember Rob speaking up several times.
Right.
He has asked people to refrain from what they were saying or rephrase what they were saying, because they were,
I think we're gonna go into that, it's a different topic, right? Or not?
We are gonna talk about what would cause termination of
So
comment.
let's talk about that first, and then you're making a very good point, Matt, so think about it.
Okay. Okay, so our current policy says that public comment can be terminated when it goes beyond 3 minutes, when it's personally directed, when it's abusive, obscene, and irrelevant. And I think that this is the biggest problem in our current policy, actually. I think that these are too vague, these comments, and that's what the PSBA is providing the additional guidance based on. So PSBA's recommendation is, and again, forgive me, this isn't exact, but just what I typed up: sexual harassment, racial, ethnic, or nationality intimidation towards an individual or individuals in the school community, disclosure of confidential information to staff, of students or staff, speech not traditionally protected by the First Amendment, obscenity, defamation, and speech integral to criminal conduct, speech that is profane, true threats, or issues that don't concern the school board. So, comments?
I'll say that again.
Yeah, I can, sorry. Okay, sexual harassment,
it's on
rape.
page 2.
Yeah, no, I just want to
racial, ethnic, or nationality intimidation towards an individual or individuals in the school community, disclosure of confidential information of students or staff, speech not traditionally protected by the First Amendment, obscenity, defamation, and speech integral to criminal conduct, speech that is profane, true threats, or issues that don't concern the board.
I will go back to clarify and to say what I said in our board meeting. On number 1, everybody should have the opportunity to come and be able to speak. If there's something that's going on in the district that needs to be discussed, whether there's a sexual harassment, a racial issue, an ethnic, religious, nationality intimidation. If there's something, we cannot restrict individuals to have that opportunity to come up and speak, and I'm not doing it. I don't want people to come up and to have anything against us. I don't want any of that. But I can't restrict people their public speech to come up and have their First Amendment right to speak on anything.
Disclosure of confidential personal
No,
information?
I've said 1.
I don't think that's what the first one
That's
meant.
what it says.
You're saying, the
Not the
first,
confidential personal information, not that one.
she's just saying this item.
Yeah.
But
because if
I
there's
think
something
you're-
in the
I-
District going on that somebody has to come up and speak about.
It's not
And
the
that's not
topic.
what they're talking
That's not.
about here. That's not what this means.
Well, that's
This
where I don't
means-
want it to be, that all of a sudden it comes into,
Oh, no, no,
that
no.
they're gonna get shut down, and they're not gonna be able to speak.
They're saying here that they cannot come up and sexually harass or intimidate someone at the meeting. That individual can't do that. They can speak on that topic, certainly. That's not what it's
Then I think
restricting.
that needs to be clarified.
No, it does, it does
Really
clarify, it
important.
says towards an individual or
Because
individuals
I wanna
in the
make
school
sure that
community.
they have the right
So they can
opportunity.
talk about it in general terms,
Yeah.
but I can't talk about someone in the school community personally as it relates to that. And a lot of these issues, we're going back into the legal thing, if you're talking sexual harassment, racial, a lot of these things may be out of the bounds of legality, in which case you would need the solicitor to make a ruling on something like that. But it does say, and I'm okay with that, it says towards an individual or individuals in the school community.
So as
So
long as
it's
we're
more-
clear on
it's
it,
more
they have to-
personal.
Okay.
Yes.
As long as we're clear that anybody has that opportunity to come up and speak on any issue, concern they
clear.
have with it.
Yeah.
How would you
This- this is-
prefer to make it clearer?
This is written the way the lawyers write it, such that it's acceptable language. And that's what the intent was here, right? It's not to say you can't talk about that
No, I
topic.
just want to make sure that if it is something
Yeah.
somebody has against
Well,
somebody, that they come up to talk.
Mr.
That's where
Roosevelt?
we're drawing the line.
Thank you. I'm sort of stuck on just, I guess, a higher level of curiosity here. This is under changing the authority section, and in the existing policy, these things are in guidelines. So we're moving like a whole section from guidelines to authority. So that's my first point of curiosity with this. I don't know why it moves a whole section. I don't know if you can answer that.
Yeah, absolutely. Our original policy did not follow the same format that even PSBA's old public comment policy followed.
Right.
It was a template from Eastburn and Gray.
Uh-huh.
This policy, the one that Rudolph von Clark gave us,
Yeah.
follows the template the way that PSBA recommends.
Okay, so PSBA is recommending we take the
Not that we
reason
move, just this is where they had it
Right.
in their template.
that, so PSBA is recommending that we nest the reasons a presiding officer can terminate speech from guidelines to authority. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, some of this might be difficult to legally define, and/or some of this gets back to the presiding officer making judgment calls, and we're trying to remove that. Now, a lot of this, I'm pretty confident that nobody sitting around this table wants to sit and listen to someone utter a whole bunch of this nonsense, right? We don't want to invite that as I said publicly, I think that as soon as a speaker starts to begin to sexually harass, issue racial, ethnic, religious, or nationally intimidations toward an individual or individuals, really negates everything else that they're going to say. The listener starts to tune out and realize that this is a person of poor character. And these things are abhorrent. But now we're back into the area of the presiding officer having to decide, did you just do this? And am I interrupting you or not? So, as public discourse, as sitting down with a conversation, yeah, no, I don't want to talk to someone. And if they start doing this, I'm probably leaving, right? But as a elected official to a volunteer position, this is what we have to do. The citizens have a right to redress their government, which we end up being. So we just have to, unfortunately, sit there and take it. It's just a broad comment overall without getting into anything specific.
Mr. Hickey?
Can we get around it by moving it back to a guideline as opposed to an authority?
I'm wondering if that's why.
My only suggestion would be to check with Mr. Musso what the
Yeah,
difference
we can ask-
between authority and guideline is.
Right, because if we move it back there, it takes, I don't need to say.
I think it leaves you in the same boat. It's still.
But it leaves you in a different boat. It's a guideline as opposed to making a judgment on it, and then that way the person who was sitting there, whether it would, maybe it would have to be Yoda or that case, but like I said before, the solicitor might say, hey, look, this is outside the bounds of legality or whatever, but we're just making this as a guideline. Now, look, we don't, like Mike said, somebody gets up there and wants to start spouting off. I mean, we see it in emails. The people who email me who
Yeah.
use that kind of language don't get a reply. The people who talk respectfully do, because I tune them out.
For the most part, we're going to end up tolerating or listening to that kind of stuff for the 3 minutes and maybe just remind someone. But I think it's a good policy to have it in there as, as awareness that we're not accepting that. I don't want somebody to say,
Right.
So that's why I would leave it in. Odds are that's not, unless it's really overt harassment like that of the fellow, it's just gonna, we're gonna tolerate it for those 3 minutes.
I just don't want it to bring any further risk or liability to this district.
Well, this is the legal recommendation.
Well, and not just the legal recommendation, it's directly from PSBA.
Yeah,
So where is
so-
the current policy? Because it's not directed.
Let's see. That, under current guidelines, go to the page. Wait a
I
minute.
couldn't find it though.
Guidelines current, page 3, under the presiding officer may require the first round of public comment be limited to subjects on the meeting agenda. Number 2, interrupt
Oh,
or
there you go.
terminate a participant's statement when the statement is too lengthy, personally directed,
Yeah.
abusive, obscene, or irrelevant.
Which is pretty vague.
It's
That's
too-
even
yeah.
more vague.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, how do you decide what's abusive and and
Or
how do you
irrelevant.
legally define obscene? We've also
Yeah.
got
Profane is also.
profane is also, how do you define? So,
Mr. Frederickson mentioned that previously our solicitor was in the practice of, pointing out when someone was crossing the line and suggesting they modify their delivery. And I don't think any board president would unilaterally be interrupting or halting a speaker without consulting with the solicitor. So I think it's a tough thing. And I think we've also seen, and PSBA has conveyed this, that courts have been more liberal in allowing people to speak their minds uninterrupted. And I think that's on our minds as well.
We have solicitors that we have to make sure that don't do that though.
Yeah,
That's what we have to do right now.
yeah. I mean, the alternative is not having any sort of restriction. I'm not sure if we want to do that.
Yeah, the comment that the presiding officer reads in front of public comment, I think is worded well.
Yes, yeah.
And I like it because somebody getting up and speaking, according to this form, they're checking a box if they understand it and they agree with it, but they may not have this to read and go through prior, so that little 4 or 5 sentences, whatever, covers really a lot of this, which is why I like it. 'Cause
Children may be listening.
exactly, it reminds people on the spot of sort of the level of behavior and speech that we'd like to hear and be witness of.
I still like to be able to go back to this if you have, if you need to
Yeah, no.
speak to individuals. So I mean, I'm fine with all of this.
Does anybody, is that okay to move forward with it as is? And
I'm
No,
not
the-
so, but I don't have the consensus on it, so I'm very concerned on what we put down on where we put the risk and liability of this district.
anything else, Yoda?
I mean, in the time that I've been on the board, we pretty much let people speak. We never really, and Rob Cox would interfere if there was something like, obviously, that he had to redirect, but he never stopped anybody. So we have this tradition and we plan to keep that tradition. We want people to come and speak their minds, whatever they want to say, but there must be some rules of conduct so that, if a child is watching, you would think twice saying things like that, right? So, I would probably just, in practice, keep the same tradition, but have the opportunity, if something goes really wrong, have the opportunity to say something and make sure that it's not a circus, but it's a civilized meeting. But usually, people can just say anything they want. 3 minutes is free speech.
I'm sorry.
Toward that end, number 3, I think, is also worded strangely. It says speech that traditionally has not been protected under the First Amendment, such as obscenity, defamation, and speech integral to criminal conduct. I would be interested to know where this country, what case law, where that has First Amendment areas that have not been protected. So it's the same thing as the first one, right? Where we don't want to hear this, and I don't want to invite it, and I don't concur with it, and I agree that we probably need some sort of
It's the same thing
guideline
like,
around these, but it's how do you legally define this?
again, it ends up being what would a reasonable person do? When you talk about, for instance, speech that's traditionally not protected. So you have First Amendment rights to say whatever you want, but you can't yell fire in a movie theater, and you can't yell a bomb when you're on the plane. So those are the kinds of things that you can't put everything in there, but they're not that's a case where it's not protected.
Right, but that your specific examples are addressed in number 5, that incite intimidation, lawless, or fear of violence.
Well, I don't know that,
So I would like to know where obscenity, defamation has not been protected under the First Amendment.
hate speech, or if
Which
it's
is
speech
disgusting.
related.
Which is disgusting, but
But if it's,
it
and
is
you're right, if it is inciting violence,
But that's not.
It is protected.
well, and criminal conduct, so that's why they're putting it in there.
I'm going to put it down for, if we call the solicitor, we'll ask.
Okay, yeah,
All right.
thank you.
It's probably,
I have 2 questions for him so far.
Because I'm not saying
It's
I
probably-
want this in, I'm just saying, I'm curious if we're
Yeah.
going to be, because PSBA isn't getting sued. Council Rock School District and/or the board members sitting around the dais are getting sued.
I do want to add also that I did talk to Mr. Musso before this meeting about this particular section because it's concerning to me. I think our current policy is too vague, and I think this is a little vague also. And he did clarify with me, and, you know, I'll let him speak for himself, but it really is what you act on. So like Yoda and Linda were saying, like, we could have it in here, and it could be in here forever, and if we never act on it, you know, it really doesn't matter. You know, it's really if you act on it, they terminated the comment. Okay? Mr. Hickey?
Which then makes it a guideline and not a,
Well, I think
Leave the last-
that's,
Yeah, that's the other
that's
question. I have
semantics.
2 questions for the solicitor so far.
yeah.
Okay. All right, the last thing I have is, should the statement be addressed to the presiding officer or the entire board? It was always, my understanding is that it used to be address your topic or your comment to the presiding officer. Are we okay to leave it with that, the way it was? Okay.
Is there a proposed change to that?
Yeah, the PSBA proposes that we direct it to, it says direct all comments to the board.
to the whole board,
Interesting.
Wait,
really?
Our current policy says statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. PSBA recommends direct all comments to the board,
As opposed to.
the presiding officer, like to the whole board as a whole.
Yeah.
Right, because it might be somebody but not you that could at the end come back to say and clarify that, or something if it had to do with something at the IU that you could clarify.
I think it's trying to, I really don't know.
I remember clearly, Mr. Solomon was very consistent about reminding speakers of this when they began to attack us individual board member. And he would remind them to please direct your comments to the presiding officer, to me, which lessened the heat of the moment. When a speaker is directing, they can still say, I think Mr. Tate is a fool, and look at Ms. Powley when they say that. But at least they're not looking at me and saying that. Ed was very consistent about doing that, and that really, I think, was effective.
Yeah, I don't see a reason to change that.
Did anyone else recommend a change other than
No.
the board?
No.
Okay.
No, I think I like the way that was applied, the way he,
The way that it is,
Yeah.
directing to the presiding officer.
yeah.
Page 4, proposed, it does, I think Peter did change that, because it does say all statements shall be directed to
Right.
the presiding officer. No participant may address or question school directors individually.
Yeah, so that's the recommendation from the PSBA. Oh, I'm sorry, no, that isn't,
No, no,
that isn't,
That's
the-
only
that-
the
I'm confused.
When
I
the
apologize.
speaker is speaking, it's directed to that. I just want to
Can
clarify.
you say it again, Ann?
That when the speaker is speaking, they're directed directly to the presiding officer, and
Yeah.
that is completely it. Okay, I just
Yeah.
want to clarify that, because
Yep.
everybody know
Okay,
where we are for comments.
so we're good with
So
that.
we're leaving that alone,
Leaving that.
basically, to presiding.
That's no change, right, Matt?
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
That's correct. Okay, I want to make sure okay.
So should we go back to your comment about allowing the,
So to speak.
I mean, it would make sense, what do you guys think, it would make sense, like, think of like the way Rob would interfere, and, you know. He never asked somebody not to speak, he just asked people to change their.
Well, I think that's different, right? Like, we're talking about when it can be terminated, and saying only the presiding officer would be able to terminate. But I think it's fine for him to say like, hey, this doesn't meet our guidelines.
And you would then say,
And then you
okay,
decide if it gets terminated or not.
you're sitting and talking to him the whole time.
You also, I guess, decide whether you interrupt or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it should be the presiding officer, not adding in solicitor.
Yep.
To Mr. Tate's point, the courts have been more about letting someone speak uninterrupted. If you have 2 people that have the ability to sidebar and both interrupt, right, I think that's.
Is that okay?
And to your point, that there's a reason why the solicitor is effectively between president and vice president, so that you all can talk and he can, or she can make a comment to the president or presiding officer.
Yeah, and Yoda can always ask the solicitor
Right.
to respond.
Okay, so we have two sticking points, I think. The first one is seating time. And the second one is the second one is the address and the form. So we can do a vote, but, not a vote, but we can see where everybody is, but it won't really be valid unless
Unless we go on the
we're
same page.
here. Well, and we're not, so,
Well, I don't know. Does anyone change it? I don't think we should seat them. An individual has their time. We have an unlimited block of time now. So if you want to speak and you want your friend to speak in your behalf, if your friend can just sign in.
Yeah,
Well,
They
would
can sign in.
And then have somebody, as you've said before, what happens if someone really can't do public speaking, but made something up, and
Then
then
they-
somebody already spoke for 3 minutes, but says, hey, they spoke, but I want
Then
them
they-
to speak,
They can
because
bring,
I will be petrified to come up there,
they bring their friend and have their friend sign in.
so.
So their friend can speak. Or send an email. I don't know that that's ever really happened when somebody's afraid to speak there. But
What section currently is the whole seating
not.
time issue?
Seating
It's
time's not in-
that's right.
it's not
Okay,
in-
yeah.
Okay. What section is it where we're proposing limitations or specifications?
Page 4,
Or,
commenters may not cede their time to other individuals.
And this is under guidelines.
Yes, sir.
This is why I'm just procedurally interested, I guess are the right words, where some things have moved from guidelines to authority and other things have remained in guidelines. And to your point, which boat does that leave them in? The same boat or different boats?
So the proposed is in the middle of the page. It just says commenters may not cede their time.
I think, unless anybody has a problem, it seems to me that we have a lot of people waiting here for comment.
Yeah.
I don't think that this is really ready to go for a first read, Matt, so I think, we'll address it at our next policy meeting. And we'll go from there, or we can stay with the current
And
policy.
hopefully everybody will be here.
Well,
Yeah.
I think
we're
we're
ready
getting
for
close, and I would like to see if we can move it forward. I would propose that we just drop the point about seating time and move forward with,
No.
that's my proposal, to just drop the point about seating time and see if we can't move this policy
We
forward.
don't have two people here tonight.
I know, that's unfortunate, but if we move forward with first read at the next meeting, we will have first read, and then we will have second read the following month. And we can, but I just, calling people out for a policy meeting when we should be able to resolve this stuff. I mean, it's like, you talk about kicking the can down the road. I feel like, let's make a decision.
Right. So,
Yeah.
as I said, I really like our current policy. I understand PSBA has guidelines that we are obliged to go through. So if we need more time to all decide and be comfortable with the changes we make, let it be. And so what if we keep our current policy an extra month or two? We may, it had served us well so far. I don't see that the rush. I mean, I think we would have.
What is the rush? Why is there such a rush?
There's no rush.
There's no rush.
There's no rush.
If we're good, I don't object to Yoda's proposal. I'm just saying that, it's a decision one way or the other. That's good.
I think we might, if we stayed here all night, maybe we could get to an agreement on seating time, but I don't think we're gonna get to an agreement on the address thing, so I think we just wait.
I think the address thing is still up to Yoda. That's a procedural thing. It's not a policy issue. It already says.
in the current
It
policy.
already says that we ask for address. So I think it's up to, Yoda can make that change next time around. And then if it's a big to-do,
And there is no time limit in the current policy.
and there's no
And
time limit, so
there
that's
is
fine.
limitation on profanity and so forth, so.
Yeah, if we keep the current policy for a while or forever, it's fine. I think that the issue, like I said, I spoke to the attorney about it, the issue is really the enforcement of those vague, words. Okay. All right.
Public comment.
If I may,
Yeah.
I just want to confirm what Matt said earlier. I reached out to Donna Nelms. We keep all meeting minutes in perpetuity. So I erroneously said, I thought it was 7 years. I stand corrected. Donna confirmed exactly what Matt said earlier. So
Okay.
just wanted to clarify that.
I think in perpetuity is longer than 100 years, but close.
She did say it may be a little bit challenging to find things before board docs came to life, but that's what she did share.
Well, again, if it's procedural, you can decide on a destruction date of things that aren't mandated by law. So you
Just
could
because
turn
the
around
minutes
and
are
say,
stayed forever doesn't
you
mean.
could say we only keep it for 6 months or 12 months, and then it's destroyed. Things like
I don't know
addresses,
if I want to open this can of worms, but we actually do have a policy on
destruction.
information and data and destruction that I was going to review with Eastland and Gray before the change.
Yeah.
And I have not had an opportunity to talk to Peter about that. That will be Ronnie's job.
That's right,
To
that's
go
right.
through that. We have a couple policies, there's some inconsistencies and we want to clean all that up.
Yeah,
Because the world has changed in the last 4 years.
All right, Mr. Tate, last point.
Yeah, I was just going to point out that while we're not moving forward with a policy change tonight, we did make a decision to do away with the 30-minute limitation on the agenda. So that 30-minute limitation that goes back several years, I think we've decided is gone. Am I correct?
That's what I have in my
Yep.
notes, yes.
And that does not need to go, and you can make that
Because
change.
it is not in the
Because
current policy, so
We're simply not going to mention
Right.
time at all. It'll just say public comment. First public comment, you still want the first public comment to be for board agenda items,
Yes, it
correct?
has to be, yeah.
that's current policy, yeah.
Which might save us time on the back end of this meeting.
There you go.
And just so we have the committee meetings, where we put that one.
The committee meetings are left open to, I just read that, it's on page 6 in the proposed.
Yeah, it's up to the discretion of
It's
the
up to the
committee
discretion of the
chair.
committee chairs.
And that's something that someday I think we ought to fix, because again, you don't want to give discretion that's not fair to the committee chairs, but that's the way it's currently worded.
Maybe we should change that.
I don't believe the current policy mentions it, committees anymore. I think we looked for that last time, we couldn't find it, right?
Yeah, I saw
Yeah,
that, what Ed said, it's up to the,
The proposed policy does have a comment. It says it's up to the committee chairs, but under board committee, page 5, but if you want to flush that out a little bit.
Alrighty.
yeah, I think we should move the discretion. I mean, because this is where we actually get our work done. I think it's actually more important to have public comment here. I mean, not that anybody ever does, they all talk at the board meetings, but this is where we actually do the work. I think it's more important that the public have access to
Any
comments here.
public meeting.
But we
they-
have, right?
So it says here, discretion, like, for example, if Ms. Oseki decided at future policy committee meetings, we're not gonna have public comment.
Well,
So I'm saying we should remove any wording that says discretion of the committee chair, right?
Does our current policy somehow,
Somehow, I
Doesn't
thought,
say,
or anything about committee meeting?
it doesn't address.
but didn't the new one say it?
The new one says it's up to discretion of the
Yeah,
committee
yeah,
chair.
yeah, get that.
Traditionally, it was, we always had public comment in the end.
Right.
And,
We've
it
always
was-
done public comment.
Yes.
So it's never not done.
it was
Correct.
not, yeah.
Yeah, just make sure we keep it.
and keep it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my own thing. Yeah, I saw somewhere discretion.
Correct.
But anyway,
Okay. All right, are we ready to move to public comment? Okay. The first person I have is Donna Perrell. Okay. Stephanie Loper.
Actually, that's just a sign-in sheet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That doesn't mean they want to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't have a separate sheet for that, I apologize.
Yeah, I'm here.
You'd like to speak?
Sure.
yeah, you can sit here at the table.
Oh, okay. That where the.
Wherever you're comfortable.
Yeah, wherever you want.
So my name's Stephanie Loper. I reside in Holland. I'm here tonight because I was concerned that the board wants to limit public comment. But, I mean, it looks like it's not going to be, so that's great. But I'm here for the, 10,000 students in our district and their parents who have a right to comment. And if they're not, like with the proposed 30 minutes, if they weren't the first 10 to arrive, then their voice might not be heard. I've been to a few school board meetings where parents had concerns that needed to be addressed and a place to make their feelings known. I don't see how this policy, which maybe not be now, but that would be student first. So if the school board is about the children and their advocates, they should have a right to speak. I've spoken to parents in the past 2 weeks and taxpayers who no longer have children in the district, and they are appalled at the thought of limiting the free speech in our district. If we're for the students, then we should be a community being able to have a dialogue with the board. It was concerning that some people, though, on the board are using the word deterrent as part of the policy for public comment. It's a bit concerning to me, but I am in favor of maintaining the current policy of open public comment in our school board rather than limiting the public comment as, that was previously proposed tonight as of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now that I understand that this is a sign-in sheet, I'm not gonna, just raise your hand if you'd like to speak.
I'm Joanne Tarrant. I'm here, for this whole policy revision and whatnot. My first recommendation is to protect the privacy of everyone. As many of you know, we've had a very delicate situation in our household. And when my husband first came up to speak the very first time, he was rather nervous about it all and intimidated. And he inadvertently, in that nervousness, had given our full address, which, as you know, an active investigation, and things like that. And so that's a very sensitive matter. So when you're putting this into place, the first thing that I was thinking of when you were saying, random people could write random addresses, just ask for people's state ID. When they come in, you just ask for the state ID. It's super simple. They walk in, you see their face on their ID, you see their name, you see which township they're in. Super simple. And when the person gets up, they don't have to say, I'm so-and-so, and in the midst of whatever is happening, they don't have to feel that they have to share that sensitive, delicate information for fear of any kind of retaliation. That's all.
I'm gonna just respond to that quickly because that was my first thought also, was okay, well, we can just ask for an
No one
ID.
said that. You guys sat here for an hour and no one
Oh,
said.
because I already asked the solicitor and I was told you can't, because somebody might have just moved, they might not have an active ID. So we were told.
That's bananas. Okay,
But I think it's a great idea and I wish we could do it.
Also, we don't limit who comes to the meeting, only who is speaking at the meeting.
Well, it would be when they sign in. That they would
It's
show
when
their
they sign,
ID.
when the person signs in.
I think it's a great idea.
When the
Yeah.
person signs in, so that even if you can't limit, you still know you have a state issued ID. So you can protect them.
I think it's a great idea.
I think
Yeah.
you will. That's a good idea.
Other comment?
Hi.
That's what that is.
Do you need my fingerprints? First, I'd like to thank Rudolph and Clark for finally presenting Council Rock School District with a nonpartisan topic that we can all come together on, which was the First Amendment, freedom of speech, a topic that has never been challenged in our district. Mr. Clark is a stranger to our school district, and it's curious that in 40 years this hasn't come up, and he's here for 3 months, and here we are. Where is Mr. Clark tonight? Why isn't he at a meeting that's open to the public on possible policy change, on public comment time? This is disturbing, and I find it curious. President Pally, what is this new vision that you keep speaking about that you still have not defined? This proposed change that we were proposing about, limiting public comment makes me wonder what controversial topics you have planned that you don't want to hear from the public about. The policy is dangerous, and it goes against our Constitution, and it's gross, and it's unwanted. Mrs. Stone, but I will speak through Mrs. Pally because I can't look at you. What is an extreme group, and how do you define that? Is that is that defined as someone who has a difference of opinion, or parents who show up to speak at a school board meeting? Because the latter group were defined during COVID as extremists. That's interesting that Rudolph Clark recommended that label of extreme group. What direction are they taking this district? I strongly disagree with getting people's addresses. Do you want to share your addresses with the public? And you're concerned about safety and security, Yoda and Mrs. Stone. How does an address make you feel safe and not make the speaker feel exposed and compromised? And what is to stop somebody from putting down a fake address? These are citizens, and you're making it feel like a police state. It's a school board meeting, It's comprised of concerned parents and citizens. If you feel so unsafe and uncomfortable interfacing with the public in this way, maybe this isn't the job for you. The public doesn't need to feel like scrutinized criminals at a school board meeting. Stop this already. Are you that fragile? It's ridiculous. On this policy 903 differences under authority proposed, changing authority, it's concerning to me. It seems as under number 4, speech that is profane. Does this include reading from obscene books in our libraries and raising awareness to the public through public comment? Doesn't that violate the First Amendment right? So if I'm understanding this correctly, in my opinion, you're still attacking our First Amendment rights, and this needs to be watched carefully on this matter. So thank you very much for listening to my comments. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Hickey? Can I reply?
Yep.
I'm going to answer one of your questions. Anybody else can answer or not answer at their discretion. The reason the solicitor isn't here is I requested that he not be here. I requested he not be here for a variety of reasons. One is, the most important is this board makes the policy, not the solicitor. We make the policy, and we're supposed to send it to the solicitor for his review to rule on the legality of such. The last time we were here, in my opinion, the solicitor dominated the meeting and basically was telling us what the policy was. So I felt that he shouldn't be here to add his input into it. He's supposed to rule on what we say. 2, when that solicitor sits here, we pay that solicitor money. And 3, just due to the nature of the policy itself, And where this originated from in the Pennsbury School District, I just felt it best that he being the law firm, not be a part of these meetings. So I'll answer that. Anybody else that wanted to answer any other questions, they can feel free to do so. But your first point was.
Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, any other comment? Go ahead.
Can you introduce yourself?
Okay, Liz Youst, Northampton Township. I wasn't sure what the back and forth, and it was a little bit difficult to hear when you were talking about who would be allowed to speak and who wouldn't be allowed to speak. And I made some notes about if I'm a caregiver or grandparent living in a neighboring township but not in Council Rock, would I still be able to speak? And then I noticed something about non-resident parent. Is that still the case? A non-resident parent, non-resident. What if it's my uncle, like a kid's uncle or aunt or somebody? How are you going to know whether they're, I guess if they said their township was something other than Council Rock Township, would you question them why they're speaking? I don't know who I'm supposed to speak to. That's my question. I'm not clear on that. I wanted to point out that at the Bucks County Commissioner meetings, they don't ask for addresses. They do have you sign in. And as far as putting an address on a form, each speaker is on live and recorded video. There is security in the room. I don't really see why there would be any issue with not allowing somebody to leave who was disruptive, and why that isn't enough security. That's just my comments. Thank you.
Okay. Think of somebody. Yep.
Hi. How are you? I'll sit right here. I'm Helene DeLuca. I'm a little nervous talking to all you guys, but it's really important to be here because, first of all, my apologies. I didn't catch the beginning of the meeting. So I missed, I'm sure, a lot. But I did catch some things that concern me, and in a broad brushstroke, right, because I don't have all the details that you've discussed. The protection and security, I think if we all agree we want people to be safe, then we have to explore that really carefully. Because if addresses of parents are asked for, people might get a little intimidated. They might wonder, well, where is this address really going to go? And what if it gets into the wrong hands? And if it does get into the wrong hands, well, then that would be potentially a liability for the district, which is a very serious matter. I wonder what the other school districts in our country do. And has any other school district asked for, information and how parents' addresses, and how do they keep that information secure? Was there any mishap? Has this new council given you that information? And am I allowed to ask questions, or I just talk?
No, we just might not
Okay.
respond. They're kind of rhetorical questions.
So I'm curious, have you guys done like a market study, so to speak, on other school boards and how they handle security? And what did the new solicitor tell you? Because you're paying him a lot.
So if you want, I can try to answer.
I would love that, thank you.
So I had, and I think I left it at home, but I had compared all of the different, or some of the different school districts in the area, and we're all going through the same thing, right? Like the PSBA guidelines came out for the entire state. So we're all looking at our policies. A lot of them are draft policies right now.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them used to ask for addresses, for you to state your address when you came up to the podium. And so now the recommendation from PSBA is don't do that, have them write it in, or just ask for the municipality.
It sounds like you've done a lot of work, but I was asking what the solicitor has given you. And what about other states?
I don't know about other states.
So, but that's a question that I'd love him to tell us, since he's such an expert at this. And my next topic, because I don't think that it's good to intimidate the people that love the students the most, if we're really students first. We are parents, and we love our kids more than any teacher, superintendent, or board will love, okay? So let's not forget that with this Students First campaign, please. If you intimidate a parent who wants to speak, that's dangerous, right? So then you're restricting their free speech, which is a violation of the Constitution. We don't want lawsuits from parents, right? Because that's just going to hurt the district. It's going to spend money, it's going to divert resources, and who's going to hurt? The kids, the students. It's not Students First, right? It's a slippery slope. Restricting free speech, intimidating parents, and then ultimately having, what? It's a control issue. I mean, what are the topics that are coming up? I speak for many parents that I've spoken with around here, and probably many more that can't take the time to come here. They're working hard, maybe they've got kids at home, and they can't come. So I hope that I can speak for all of those people, all right? So I think working together is really got to happen, because if there's a restriction of free speech, intimidation of parents, and then a feeling that the parents don't have enough control over their own children, that's not good for the district, whether you're sitting on this side of the table or that side of the table. So I'm just really concerned about these new definitions that PSBA has put forth. I have not read them. It's only from what I'm hearing now. Okay, but they're slippery slope definitions. It's making it complicated. And who makes the decision on how to stop someone from speaking? And who and how? And then the last thing is profanity, right? No one wants to hear curses, right? No one wants to be yelled at. No one wants to be called names, right? But we're all talking about free speech. Wherever you stand, if you're reading a quotation, is that considered profanity? I don't know, what's the legal definition of that? I don't know, I'm not a lawyer. So can I ask you what the new solicitor, what did he advise?
I mean, their advice is copy and paste from the PSBA.
No, I'm talking real life here, right? So when a parent gets up, and if they're quoting someone, and there happens to be a curse in there, or something that someone feels uncomfortable with, is that allowed? And what did the solicitor say? Did he advise you on that? Have you discussed it? Did you ask him? What is the law? Because I don't know. I'm just asking because I'm curious.
I didn't ask him.
Can anybody get back to me?
I can tell you from a human resources point of view, if you're using profanity to attack someone, then that's considered. But if you're quoting something, just like Anne was asking about sexual harassment, if you're describing something that had happened, that's fine. But if I called you a name and was harassing you, that would be discounted. So
And that makes sense.
those are big differences.
Right, that makes
And
sense.
that's how it's written in that regard.
Is that written in our policy? Can you tell me where that's written in our policy so I can write that down?
Oh,
Thank you.
I'll show you.
Mr. Luca, I'm gonna move on to the next person.
Okay.
Is there more public comment?
I don't want to lose my public comment. I just, so.
Oh, wait,
I-
no,
wait,
no,
wait, I just, it's in our policy, what she said is in our policy?
no, that's how legally, how the
Okay, but
policy is
why isn't it in
interpreted.
our policy?
Because then we would write a book like this that tries to.
You didn't write a
explain-
book.
You
You
know.
said it in two
Okay,
sentences.
we're,
I think.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't,
Yeah,
I
but
want to be
that's-
respectful, and obviously,
It's accepted.
I'm
That's her.
nervous, so I'm sorry. Okay, because I've
That's
never spoken
accepted.
to a board before at a board meeting in my life, so I'm a little nervous. But that's my question.
Thank you.
I would love to know, like later, maybe you can tell me where that is. And then I think that would help. if the spirit is, we don't want to say, you know, I mean, I think the way that you already have the existing policy doesn't need to be really expanded if you, or get confusing with all these extra things in the new PSB. So I'm rambling, I'm gonna stop, but hopefully I made my point. So thank you so much. And
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Probably,
Anybody else?
I'll give you my version of it.
Okay,
I do have it.
all right, I think we're done. Everybody have a good night. Thank you.
Mr. Seki,
I thought you were done.
if you'd like,
No, it's okay.